Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching a brand new edition of Policy Watch with me, Frank Pereira. India's Chief Economic Advisor Arvind on Tuesday spoke on a range of issues related to bank recapitalization, rollout of goods and services tax and policy reforms. He went on explaining various solutions which the government can adopt in the future for the country's potential economic growth. Subramanian, whose tenure as CEA has recently been extended, earlier told Mint in an interview that India has potential to achieve 8.5% annual economic growth rate. It may be noted that India's GDP data touched a three-year low in the Q1 FY18 at 5.7% compared to 6.1% in Q4 FY17 and 7.9% in Q1 FY17. On this edition of Policy Watch, we will analyze how can India achieve 8.5% growth. Joining me on the program today are Dr. Arvind Virmani, former Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, and Priya Ranjan, Senior Journalist. Thank you to both my guests for joining me on this edition of Policy Watch. Dr. Virmani, I'd like to begin with you, of course. Is it possible for us to achieve 8.5% growth, and how do we achieve it?
So, first thing I would say is, you have to be careful distinguishing between short term. Like you mentioned the quarterly data, when I look at long term growth, that is completely irrelevant to me. I look at actually 10 years of growth data. So, just to give you a little background, over the last 5 years, we've averaged about 7.1, 7.2% growth. And the 10 years before that, it was a little higher, about 7.5 to 8. So the first thing is, when we say 8.5%, is it possible? We are not talking about 1 quarter or 1 or 2 years. Is it possible on a sustained basis, 5-year basis? Yes, I think with the reforms already underway, if they are completed adequately and not given up, we can jump to 8.5% in the next 5 years. But again, as I said, 5 years is not enough to really move you, let's say, from lower middle income to upper middle income. So you need to talk in decades, and there I think continuing reforms will be needed. I mean, one can discuss what is needed or not, but what we know from studying many countries which have grown fast is that you can't rest on your laurels. You do a push of reforms, it gets you higher growth for a certain amount of time, then new obstacles come, new problems arise, and you got to keep doing the reforms.
You need to keep reinventing yourself with the changing times is what you're suggesting.
If you want to grow for 10, 15, 20 years.
And that's what we want to do at the end of the day.
That's what we want to do.
Yes, okay. Priya Ranjan, what are the factors that are restricting the economy at this point in time, and how do we come out of this bubble of sorts?
So, I entirely agree with Dr. Virmani. Before I talk about what is it that is holding us back, I may just add to what Dr. Virmani was saying, that this 8.5% growth is that the potential, India has the potential to grow by 8.5%. It's not just a question of potential, it has been achieved in the past. As you would see that between 2004 and 2008, 2009, you had growth, 8.5% growth. In fact, insofar as the potential is concerned, that it has looked always for at least in this millennium, that India could not only grow by 8.5% annually, but could even achieve a double-digit growth rate of 10% or more. So that potential is always been there. 8.5% is something that has already been achieved. So there is no question about it. And as Dr. Virmani was mentioning, that the key ingredient of that is continued reforms. Now, coming to the question of what is it that holding us back, we know that you see, there are if you say there are two factors that needs to be conducive for growth to be very fast. One is the external factor, and in our economy, although we are a domestically driven economy, but our external factors are also important, at least insofar as energy imports are concerned, commodity imports are concerned, because of our dependence on these imports. although we are not that dependent on foreign savings, for instance, but or for that matter on export demand as such, because we've not been that dependent like some other major economies which have grown fast. They have grown on an export-led basis.
Yes.
So that dependence is not there, but external factors are important. And the period during which we've grown by 8.5% is a period where the international environment was conducive. It was a time of global growth. So, you know, all the boats rose, and along with that, we also did well during that period. So one thing that will be required, of course, or we should hope for, is a better conducive external environment for India to grow. And I would say that at the moment, or we've had in recent years, if not a totally conducive external environment, but an environment that is not adverse. But it is so primarily, what is it that holding us back is our own domestic situation, or our inability to do the right policies, which are, to my mind, holding us back from growing at a much faster rate than we've grown. And there I would say that we've always known which are the policies that needs to be adopted. We've always known the kind of reforms that were required to be done, but unfortunately, either we have delayed those reforms, or we haven't undertaken them at all.
Okay. Yeah, sure. You know, taking that point forward, you know, Mr. Dash just said that we can even achieve double-digit growth. It is possible. We can do it. What needs to be done as an immediate measure, do you think, Dr. Virmani?
You know, what my study of high growth economies showed was that once you have achieved a certain jump, the real problem is sustaining it. You know, I have found there are very few countries which keep going step by step up, but the good ones sustain for longer. So I'm re-emphasizing, but it's very important to understand that the key to becoming developed in some sense of that word is to sustain higher growth, whatever it is, whether it's 8, 8.5, rather than going on thinking that we can go up and up, you know, to 9, 10, 11, 12. That's not what normally we've seen in history. Okay, so what needs to be done? So immediately, of course, there are the fiscal stuff which maybe we will discuss in the next segment. In the short run, you know, the tax, the expenditure reform, etc., which are in process, but clearly need to be expedited, and we can discuss further. But the pending things are 3 or 4. One is land. You know, land is connected with construction. It's connected with the decline in investment which has taken place over the last 4 or 5 years. So it's connected to a lot of things people don't realize. And there are now studies, a friend of mine at the World Bank who has done a lot of research on this issue, that land is a major factor. By land, you have to see the whole complex of things connected with it, transfer, this, that, building permits, etc. We've discussed this in EODB. Labor, but labor is, of course, the traditional ones of these 22 or 44 laws, etc., and simplifying them, but the key to remember is the basic education and skills. I emphasize again, you know, in many seminar discussions, we talk about the high end, you know, AI, this, that, but you know, the 85% of the economy is informal. Of that, 70% is self-employment, okay, or some such number. And you need to upgrade the skills. That's how you get higher productivity and higher income. So this whole issue of labor and skills, etc. And then to quickly mention, agriculture is one of the most unreformed sectors. You know, the approach we have to farmers is that they are somehow inadequate. They are not, you know, what people call of a lesser god. They are intelligent people. They, you know, free them up. We have huge things which are supposedly to protect them. Okay, that is not how to protect them. What you've done is you put them in a straight jacket. You need to reform the agricultural sector, both with respect to external and internal. To give one example, every time there is a shortage, we import. Every time there's an excess, we stop the export. You know, these arbitrary things which you are not doing, it's not for the farmers, it's for protecting something else. Okay, and finally, external sector. it's very important that was rightly mentioned that external economy is improving right now. So there is a great opportunity. We must clean up our external policy, which has not been reformed for something like 5-10 years now, surprisingly. Even though Manmohan Singh and others were known for reforms, there's been no change in EXIM policy, in tariffs for the last, I think, almost 10 years now.
You know, going forward, Mr. Dash, what should our priority areas be?
Well, if you actually go back a little bit and look at when and how India attracted global attention as the so-called India story, if you look at it with the Goldman Sachs report of the BRIC report, for instance. Now, when they projected a certain growth rate for those which economies like India, which later came to be known as emerging economies, and that these economies were projected to go, India for instance, by 2030 to reach a certain level of development. Now, the basic model, if you look at it, that was based on the so-called demographic dividend. So, like Dr. Virmani just pointed out, the key area to focus on is the demographic dividend. And in this century, if it is to be India's century, then if you look at in this century, in the last 17 years, those that is the area which we have not achieved much in terms of actually harnessing that demographic dividend. So the window that was open for India to grow, that window, that opportunity we have not really cast in. And today we are reaching a stage where that so-called demographic dividend is turning out to be a demographic nightmare, I would say. Especially if you look at the job market, which is Dr. Virmani also mentioned about that, the labor market reforms or the action that is required in that is precisely the area where we have lagged behind.
Sure.
And today, to my mind, the biggest problem that we face, or the biggest growth obstacle, which has now become a growth obstacle also, you know, ironically it should have aided growth, is, so that's why I call it a nightmarish situation that we've started to face now. Unless action is urgently taken and we really tackle this issue, which we've spoken about it for several years now, you know, skill development, education, health, you know, all that is required to harness that resource that we have, which is what would actually bolster India's growth rate.
All right. I think we've discussed quite a bit as far as how India can achieve 8.5% growth. It's time for a short break now. Still to come, Union Cabinet approves setting up of the 15th Finance Commission that will decide the distribution of tax proceeds among the centre, states and local bodies. We'll analyse the role of the FFC on the other side. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Tales that inspire. Stories of social change. A salute to diversity. Promoting public discourse. Events that motivate. Inspiring the innovative spirit. Watch Rajya Sabha television documentaries.
One of the greatest exponents of Carnatic music, MS Subbulakshmi or MS to her fans. An icon even to a younger generation brought up on fusion and rock music. MS is the first musician ever to be awarded the Bharat Ratna, also the first Indian musician to receive the Raymond Magsaysay Award. As India's cultural ambassador, she also performed at the UN General Assembly in 1966. Former Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru once said of MS, "Who am I, a mere Prime Minister, before a queen of music?"
Welcome back. You're watching Policy Watch with me, Frank Pereira. The Cabinet on Wednesday approved the setting up of the 15th Finance Commission, which will assess the tax resources of the nation and suggest a formula for their devolution among states. The members of the Commission and its terms of reference will be notified in due course of time. Its recommendations will have to be in place before April 1st, 2020. As per Article 280 of the Constitution, the Commission is required to make recommendations on the distribution of the net proceeds of taxes between the centre and the states. In our next segment, we will discuss the role of the 15th Finance Commission. Still with me on the program now are Dr. Arvind Virmani, former Chief Economic Advisor to the Government of India, and Priya Ranjan, senior journalist. Mr. Dash, 15th Finance Commission has been, or is not yet set up, but the Cabinet has given its nod. What's the role of the 15th Finance Commission going to be?
See, as we all know, it's a constitutionally mandated Finance Commission. Every 5 year, the Finance Commission has to be set up, and the recommendation of the 15th Finance Commission would have to be implemented from 1st of April 2020. That is fiscal 21. The recommendations have to be there. So the Cabinet has taken the decision, as is required to be done every 5 years under the Constitution. Now we have, we know that the 14th Finance Commission, which is under implementation actually, is, and the devolution of resources to the states and among the states, the sharing of resources among the states. That the 14th Finance Commission was a very important, I would say, a milestone Finance Commission, which its recommendations, and the main one being devolution of 42%
yes,
as the share of states from the centre's tax resources. That was a milestone development, and after that, we've had the main, on the taxation side, on the indirect taxes, we've had this huge, I would say, radical tax reforms getting into the GST regime. Now, when the 15th Finance Commission looks at the resources of the centre and devolution of resources that will be done to the states, clearly the implementation of GST,
yes,
and the issues arising out of it will be an important subject for the 15th Finance Commission to look at. The situation that with regard to the state finances, when the 14th Finance Commission examined the issue and the situation that the state finances would be facing when the 15th Finance Commission looks at the issue would be quite different.
Yes.
And so that is I would say would be another challenge for the 15th Finance Commission
Sure.
to see. Then the third thing is there are emerging new areas which the 15th Finance Commission also has to look at and see how those areas need to be financed. In the past, Finance Commission has looked at specific areas, be it judicial reforms or police reforms or things like that,
Yes.
where and come up with recommendations, making available resources so that those developments of those areas can be carried forward.
Sure.
Similarly, for the 15th Finance Commission also there are emerging areas where it has to look at how those fields will be financed.
All right. We'll get into the emerging areas in just a bit. But, talking about a post-GST era, is the job of the Finance Commission going to be even more difficult, Dr. Virmani?
See, actually, you should go back. I think the big change from the previous Finance Commissions is there is no longer a planning commission. Now, though it was abolished in the term of the 14th Finance Commission, this from start has to, I think it will be a different thing in a way. It will be the first time a commission is appointed when there is no planning commission, there is no gradual formula, there is no grants, etc., which used to go through the planning commission. Now, the 14th Finance Commission did make a start because it happened during that. They also were aware of GST. So, let me take the first, the expenditure side, which is the planning commission. So, though they were aware that it's abolished, and at the end of their thing they took account of it, that which involved two major things. One is what already is mentioned quite rightly, the devolution, but corresponding the very close look at this decentralization. What are the things which are on the state list or the concurrent list where the states are responsible, and then defining the money part of it, which he has addressed. But I think now they have to take a de novo look at that whole issue, because I think there's too much confusion in the public mind, in Parliament, among the states, that there are certain things which are the responsibility of the states, certain of the union, and you must be held, you have the money, you must have the money, and you must be accountable. So that is one area which goes to the future.
So platform to work on is what you're
That's
saying.
right.
It has to be built from
there
scratch.
There is confusion because we've never had this before. Now
Yes.
we will. That's why I'm saying, in a way, this is a new direction if you want to look at it that way, but I think it's a critical difference which they must account for. And the second part, which is quite rightly mentioned, the GST. Of course, we knew there would be a GST, etc., but exactly what form it would take and what the revenues, etc., would be, obviously has now come in, and they will take a closer look at it, and that clearly will be quite important. Though I think the sharing formula is already defined in the I forget, in the constitution or the law now, but in any case I think it's in the constitution, so they don't really have a role there if that is true. I guess they could suggest constitutional changes, but I'm not sure about this. Maybe you can tell us. Okay, so these are the two main things, and then just so that before he comes back in, the future things of course are normally not beyond the capabilities of state thing. For example, this whole thing about climate change or things like that, which are big issues, are generally left to the initiative of the union government. So there will be some issues like that which they may define, and where the money really has to stay with the union government.
Sure. Mr. Dash, talking about challenges, you did mention a couple of them, and talking about emerging areas, what do you think the 15th Finance Commission will have to deal with?
See, on this GST thing itself, there is an unfinished agenda, because as we know, the GST that has been launched is far from a perfect system. It's still evolving, and to begin with, important, like petroleum products, petrol, diesel, and electricity, those things have been out of GST, but they would be coming into GST. That's the plan. So when the 15th Finance Commission starts its work, we'll have this GST thing getting implemented, passage of time, and the evolution of the GST. So the Finance Commission will have to look at the availability of resources after the indirect tax regime, the new regime is implemented, and see how it has to be devolved. One. Second is, now if we've yesterday itself there has been a decision to revisit something that Prime Minister himself had indicated some time ago, to revisit the direct tax regime. Direct tax, that is,
yes,
the income tax.
Income tax, yeah.
Yes. So and a task force is going to be formed there. So direct tax reforms, we may say, are also on the cards, which will be unfolding in coming months. Now that is about the resources that is available for the center to be shared among the states. So clearly 15th Finance Commission will have to look at the direct tax reforms that are attempted and what impact it will have on centre's resources.
Yes.
And consequently how it can be devolved to the states. That is the thing. The other important thing are the emerging areas where like Dr. Virmani mentioned, climate change for instance, where we have national goals in terms of carbon footprint reduction, etc., where the states have to also put in action programs to be able to meet and contribute to meeting the national goals.
Right.
So if the action has to lie with the state government, then they need to be financed too. Similarly, there are some other areas. There are several settled questions.
Sure.
For instance, I think the regime that you have in terms of the disaster management financing and those kind of
right.
National emergency issues, there I think things are settled. I don't think they need to be revisited.
Okay. I've got time for one final comment on the program. So, Dr. Virmani, close the show for us with your concluding remarks as to, what can we expect as far as the 15th Finance Commission is concerned?
I just want to take one point on the income tax. He's quite right. One thing I would speculate, which is would be a combining of the income tax with the direct benefit transfers. It's something I have recommended. It's in that book, India at 70, Modi at 3.5. That would be a big change. And that if that happens, then the whole nature of Finance Commission and how they have to look at it may also be affected. So I just wanted to leave you with that thought.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good thought to leave with. Yeah. All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of Policy Watch. I'd like to thank my guests, Dr. Arvind Virmani and Priya Ranjan for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. Before I go, of course, we are always keen to hear from you, our viewers. You can send us your feedback at policywatch.feedback@gmail.com. That's it from us. Thank you so much for watching. See you again next time.